Where would you rank Quinn Ewers currently on a list of modern Texas quarterbacks or your Mount Rushmore of modern Texas quarterbacks?
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis and Lacey Butler, your hosts. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, where does Quinn Ewers rank on your Mount Rushmore of modern quarterbacks? I can only go off what I watched. So I'm going from the year 2000 to the year 2024. In the second segment, I don't know why it says F15, but we got 15 players on the Shrine Bowl watch list for Texas Longhorn football players for the end of the season. And then in the last segment, Texas is in the top 6 for Aaliyah Chavez. Aaliyah Chavez, the number 1 basketball player in the country for the 2025 class, currently residing in Lubbock, Texas. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I saw this question posed on Twitter. I think it was last week during SEC Media Days, and I had sent it to Lacey, and we had talked about, discussing it on the podcast. So I thought today would be a good day to discuss it. Where does Quinn Ewers rank, on a list of modern quarterbacks or, on your list of Texas quarterbacks, Mount Rushmore of Texas quarterbacks, however you want to do it? I keep saying modern, or, I've said, from 2000 to 2024 because I was born in 1993. Obviously with Texas being a blue blood program, there are a ton of quarterbacks over our history that you could consider, I should say, to put on a Mount Rushmore, but I was born in 1993. So really I would consider my University of Texas watching that period in the history that, I have full knowledge of from 2000 to 2024. Now, I think even in that time span, if you're talking about a Mount Rushmore, there's really only 4 quarterbacks that you could qualify to put on their period, right? From 2000 to 2024. So, if somebody disagrees, with what I have from 2000 to 2024, or feel like somebody prior to that is too important to leave off the Mount Rushmore, I certainly understand. Like I said, I can only react to, the quarterbacks I've seen as a 30-year-old podcast host. And really what kind of makes it easy is in the fact of the span of years I'm talking about, right? From 2000 to 2024. If we're talking about a Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, there's really only 4 Texas quarterbacks in that span that will qualify to be in the discussion. So really the discussion just becomes, where would you place Quinn Ewers amongst that 4? Because like I said, there's really only 4 quarterbacks that even deserve to be on a Mount Rushmore discussion of modern quarterbacks for the University of Texas. And obviously those 4 would be Sam Ehlinger, Quinn Ewers, Colt McCoy, and Vince Young, right? And so I think, for most people participating in that poll, it was, where would you rank Quinn Ewers amongst those 4 quarterbacks, right? And so on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, that's going to be the exercise in the first segment, right? Where would I rank Quinn Ewers on a list right now, right ahead of the 2024 season, amongst Sam Ehlinger, Colt McCoy, and Vince Young? And my takeaway is, right now, I would have the Quinn Ewers 3rd on that list, with the possibility of getting as high as 2nd on that list this year. And now I'm going to explain why, right? Right now, I would have Sam Ehlinger 4th on that list on the Mount Rushmore of modern Texas quarterbacks. Once again, this is from 2000 to 2024. I would have Sam Ehlinger 4th on that list currently. I would have Quinn Ewers 3rd on that list currently on the Mount Rushmore of Texas quarterbacks. So I would already have Quinn Ewers surpassing Sam Ehlinger. Now I have to add the obvious disclaimer that Quinn Ewers obviously right now is in a better situation than Sam Ehlinger was for the duration of his college career, right? He had Tom Herman as his coach, did not have a great culture at the University of Texas, did not have the best teams around him, right? He did have talent at some of the skill positions. Really can't even compare the talent he had at the skill positions to what Quinn Ewers has had. But just in terms of a team that could actually compete on a national level, a team that was built the right way, the right type of culture at the University of Texas, being able to develop and get the most out of those players, Quinn Ewers definitely is in a better situation in terms of those things compared to what Sam Ehlinger had, right? Now that we've got that disclaimer out of the way, I still would put Quinn Ewers a spot ahead of Sam Ehlinger because at the end of the day, on the high end, he was able to achieve two things that Sam Ehlinger never was, right? Quinn Ewers was able to deliver a conference championship to the University of Texas, which, situation or not, Sam Ehlinger never was able to, even though he played in a conference championship game. And Quinn Ewers was able to lead this team to the playoffs, right? Which Sam Ehlinger never was able to do, to lead the University of Texas to the playoffs, right? Now, when you look at Sam Ehlinger, there's a lot of people that looked at what he was able to accomplish in his time at the University of Texas. And people would look at Sam Ehlinger and say he was a general, right? He just made things happen a lot of times, especially with his legs, right? What he was able to do over 4 years to war with, right? Like he definitely was a leader, the unquestioned leader of this football team. And you knew you had a chance week in and week out because Sam Ehlinger was your quarterback. And where Sam Ehlinger has a huge edge over Quinn Ewers is obviously with his legs, right? Because in 4 years, he accounted for almost 2,000 rushing yards and 33 touchdowns, right? Through 2 years as a starter, Quinn Ewers has like 89 rushing yards. In college, there's that weird rule where you take a sack and it takes away your rushing yards, right? And obviously, there's not a bunch of design runs for Quinn Ewers. Sam Ehlinger carried the ball over 550 times. So he accounted for 2,000 rushing yards and 33 touchdowns over 4 years. Quinn Ewers only has 6 rushing touchdowns over his first 2 years. So that's a big advantage for Sam Ehlinger. But when you look at the passing, I think even though, the counting stats will be higher for Sam Ehlinger because he played more games, like there's just no way Quinn Ewers can reach Sam Ehlinger's counting stats. When you look at the passing stats per game and the percentages and the averages, they're all better than Sam Ehlinger's, right? And so then that's why I would say the playoffs and the conference championship are the edge that I give Quinn Ewers over Sam Ehlinger. Because when you look at it, he's just been objectively the better passer, right? Overall, Sam Ehlinger would produce more yards per game. But in terms of passing, right, and that's what we pay our quarterbacks to do, to pass the ball, he is a higher passer rating, more yards per game, more yards per attempt, and a higher completion percentage, right? So all of the general passing stats, Quinn Ewers has been better than Sam Ehlinger in that regard, and he has another year to kind of add on to those. Like I said, he'll never catch Sam Ehlinger in counting stats for passing. He'll obviously never catch Sam Ehlinger in terms of rushing stats, but the fact that he has a conference championship and a playoff appearance on his resume more than likely will add another playoff appearance to his resume and has the opportunity to win another conference championship is the reason that I have to put Quinn Ewers over Sam Ehlinger already. Now, I would have Colt McCoy over Quinn Ewers right now. So I would have Quinn Ewers at number 3, Colt McCoy at number 2. Once again, this is from 2000 to 2024. Now, Colt McCoy and Quinn Ewers are tied for conference championships at 1, right? With Colt doing it in 2009. And then, obviously Quinn Ewers doing it last year. Colt didn't have the playoff system, but he did go to a national championship game and would have went to 2 had it not been for the Texas Tech game in 2008, right? Colt McCoy was robbed of the opportunity to play in 2 national championships because of one of the worst tackle attempts you'll ever see on Michael Crabtree, and then one of the worst interception attempts you'll ever see by Blake Gideon in that Texas Tech game. But still love him. He's on the staff right now. He's our safety coach, right? Quinn did take Texas to the playoffs. Colt McCoy individually was a 2-time All-American, completed over 70% of his passes for his career, which is second all time. And it's literally barely second all time. Like Colt Brennan is 70.4 and Colt McCoy is 70.3. So statistically, he's not, but you could arguably say he's the most accurate college quarterback of all time. Because like I said, he's literally 0.1 percentage points behind Colt Brennan. Rest in peace, rest his soul. So he's second all time in completion percentage for a career and third all time for a single season. In 2008, he completed 76% of his passes. That's only behind Mac Jones, another Steve Sarkisian product, in 2020. And then I think Bo Nix broke the record last year, throwing all those passes behind the line of scrimmage. But either way, right? 2008, that record held for 12 seasons, right? Colt McCoy, that's how accurate he was at the University of Texas. And he was a better runner than Quinn Ewers in terms of yards and touchdowns and has a higher passer rate, right? So I think in terms of being a passer and a runner, he's better at both than Quinn Ewers, right? Now, I think Quinn has 2 opportunities to pass Colt McCoy this year, not 3, right? If Colt McCoy, I mean, if Quinn Ewers was able to win a conference championship this year, that obviously would be a hell of an accomplishment, right? You win the Big 12, you break records in the Big 12 championship game, you come in your first year in the SEC and you win an SEC championship. That would absolutely make Quinn Ewers a legend at the University of Texas, even though I think he already is. And that certainly would, be a great, feather in his cap, right? In terms of an argument with Colt McCoy. But to me, a conference championship in isolation really would not be enough for me to put Quinn Ewers over Colt McCoy, because I still objectively think Colt McCoy is the better player. Of course, we have another season to go, and Quinn Ewers could just blow me out of the water this year. But right now, based on what I've seen, I think Colt McCoy is the better player. And I think that, Quinn Ewers, at least offensively, has been in the better situation, right? Now, if Quinn Ewers goes out and wins a national championship this year, or if Quinn Ewers goes out and wins a Heisman Trophy this year, then I would naturally have to put him over Colt McCoy as the second best quarterback in modern Texas football history from 2000 to 2024. But just another conference championship, as impressive as it would be to go into the SEC this year and win it, that would not be enough, in my opinion, to put him over Colt McCoy. I would still have Colt McCoy number 2 in this modern era. But if he goes out and wins a national championship or a Heisman this year, I would have no choice, right? No choice but to put him over Colt McCoy. But like I said, right now, one of the most accurate quarterbacks of all time, a very good runner, took Texas to a national championship where he only played 3 snaps. Should have went the year before if it wasn't for some defensive miscues. I just think that objectively, based on what we've seen thus far, Colt McCoy was the better player, and that's why I would keep him at 2 unless Quinn Ewers once again wins a national championship or wins the Heisman this year, right? And then number 1 would be Vince Young, and I just don't think that's going to change, right? It's going to be hard for anybody post-2000 to be put on the level or above Vince Young, right? When you look at it, just in comparison to Quinn Ewers, right? They both have the conference championship. Neither one has a Heisman, but a lot of people say that Vince Young was snubbed for a Heisman, which, there's very good arguments for. And then Vince Young won the national championship, right? But Vince Young won that national championship. First of all, not even just a national championship. He won that Rose Bowl against Michigan, right? One of, a really good games, one of the best Rose Bowls ever. And they came back and, won up that performance in the Rose Bowl against USC, against a team that had won 2 straight national championships. I think they had won over 30 straight games. He puts on that performance, and the way he wins that game at the end, the way that game is revered as possibly the greatest college football game of all time, how dynamic he was as a runner, just rushing for over 1,000 yards in a season. I think even if Quinn Ewers wins the SEC this year, I think even if Quinn Ewers wins a national championship this year, even if Quinn Ewers wins the Heisman this year, now, that's a lot, right? Now, if he does all 3 of those, we might have to have a different conversation, right? But I just think even if he wins a natty this year, or even if he wins the Heisman, I think Texas fans will still look at Vince Young as the model, the number 1 quarterback that we've had from 2000 to 2024. I think people would still look at Vince Young as the standard. And I think no matter what Quinn Ewers accomplishes this year, I think the highest he can get to 2, but I think it'll be hard for Texas fans to say, yeah, he or anybody post 2000 was better than Vince Young, unless somebody just comes through with like a Stetson Bennett, type run, or somebody comes through and wins 3 or 4 natties at the University of Texas. Vince Young will always be number 1 in our hearts. And I think the most that Quinn Ewers can strive for is to get ahead of Colt McCoy this year and be the second best quarterback in the modern era at the University of Texas behind Vincent Young. All right, a quick word from our sponsors, and we get into 15 players on this roster that are on the Shrine Bowl. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And some of the best parts of Gametime are the priority last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Flash deals save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Zone deals save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. All-in pricing, toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And seat views, get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. All right. So it's been a good couple of years, I guess, for the University of Texas at the Shrine Bowl randomly. Last year, Ryan Watts participated in the Shrine Bowl, and then he was selected, I believe, in the fifth round, either the fifth or sixth round, but he was selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the NFL draft, right? One of 11 players from this past team to get selected. And then last year, a lot of you may not know or may not remember, your forever head coach, Steve Sarkisian, was inducted into the Shrine Bowl Hall of Fame, right? Him and Steve Smith Sr., legendary wide receiver for the Panthers, were both inducted into the Shrine Bowl Hall of Fame at the same time last year, right? And so now, a year after you had one of your best players showcasing their skills in the Shrine Bowl, and then your head coach, right, from his playing days at BYU, is inducted into the Shrine Bowl Hall of Fame. Now you have 15 players from this roster that are on the Shrine Bowl watch list, right? After, last week at SEC Media Days, Steve Sarkisian said that this unequivocally is the most talented team he's had since 2021. And I think, when you see a list like this of, 15 players being on the watch list, it's, confirmation bias for that, right? If he says this is one of the most talented teams he's ever had, you lose 11 players to the NFL draft, and then 15 are on the Shrine Bowl watch list, and only, players that are considered seniors, right, can be on this list, right? So, there would be a lot more if it wasn't just limited to seniors. So once again, that's just confirmation bias to what Steve Sarkisian. So when you look at the 15 players that are on the Shrine Bowl watch list as of now, right, and should be or should continue to be throughout the season, because I expect all of them to be really good players. Number one, Quinn Ewers, quarterback, right. Number two, in his first year in the burnt orange and white, Trey Moore, edge rusher, coming over from UTSA. Number three, Alfred Collins, expecting a big year for him. If you watch yesterday's show, you would see on the top 10 list from Inside Texas, sources around the team have him as the fourth best player on the team right now going into fall camp. So he certainly should be on the East-West Shrine Bowl list. Alfred Collins, interior D lineman. Andrew Makuba at safety, right? We haven't announced our starters at safety, but he's on the Shrine Bowl watch list right now. It's one of the best safeties in the country. Jahdae Barron, they have him listed as a safety. He's going to do a little bit of everything for us this year. Probably more, star and then outside corner, but could play a little bit of safety if you needed him to. They have him listed as that. Either way, he's on the East-West Shrine Bowl list. Baron Sorrell at edge, on that list that I talked about yesterday, he surprisingly came in as the 10th best player on this football team right now ahead of fall camp. Should expect a really good season from him, whether he's the starter all year or Colin Simmons steps into that spot. But I think Baron Sorrell will be a really good edge rusher for us this year. Hayden Connor, one of the more underrated players on this football team, just in terms of production and impact, the way that he's held down that left guard spot. I know at times there can be some penalty concerns, but I think overall he's been a really good guard for us on a really good offensive line the last couple of years. Silas Bolden, one of the newest additions to the team, transfer over this year from Oregon State, just got onto campus in May. But every review of Silas Bolden is he's just spectacular, right? And he's 5'8", but he plays so much bigger than his size. You could play him outside. You could play him in the slot. You could play him on special teams. You could play him at running back, right? At 5'8", 165 pounds. And even though he's kind of significantly smaller, especially in terms of height, than Xavier Worthy, he's drawn a lot of Xavier Worthy comparisons in terms of just being able to hit his head on the goalpost with any play. All right, Jake Majors, the way I talk about him on here, he's obviously definitely one of my favorite players on this football team, one of the leaders on this football team, the quarterback of the offensive line, the glue of the offensive line. This was really cool this offseason to see him get his flowers, right? Being on On3's top 100 players list, did not expect that. On that list I talked about yesterday, he was mentioned. Sorry, I know that lagged out for like the last 4 or 5 seconds. Just bear with me. I was talking about Jake Majors, and just saying it's cool for him to be on this list and cool for him to get all this recognition because he's one of the best centers in the country, right? And whatever award they get for the centers, he should be on that watch list as well. Gavin Holmes right now contending with Javion Cole to be the field corner, but it's good to see him on this list. Jermaine Lowell, interior defensive line, one of the reinforcements we brought in through the transfer portal, after losing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. David Benda, a senior on this football team, glad he came. I'm glad he came back as a veteran leader, especially with Anthony Hill stepping up into that Mike spot. David Bender coming back as a veteran and, a really good downhill player, off-ball linebacker, a gym rat, something that would really help this defense. Gunnar Helm, excited to see him in a new role without JT Sanders. Obviously, we have Amari Nyblack and Juan Davis. That'll be factors on this football team too, but excited to see Gunnar Helm this year. Vernon Broughton, excited to see him next to Alfred Collins. A lot of people feel like Alfred Collins may break out this year, but Vernon Broughton certainly could break out this year as well. And then Burt Auburn, one of the best kickers in the country, certainly got some of the best hair in the country. He was preseason all SEC first team, and he's on the Shrine Bowl watch list. So makes me think that one day I'll be watching, some of the best hair in college football. One of my favorite players in the burnt orange and white playing in the National Football League as well, right? Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into the number one player in the country in 2025 for women's basketball. Texas is in her top 6. Welcome. All right, so getting out of here in the third segment, talking about Aaliyah Chavez, and one thing I want to highlight is, just how elite, our recruiting has been for women's basketball. So Vic Schaefer and his staff definitely have been hot on the trail, recruiting at an elite level. And obviously that takes buy-in from, the big people up front, right? So CDC and everybody investing in women's basketball, investing in NIL for women's basketball certainly is paying off, right? So Aaliyah Chavez, number one overall player in the country in 2025, point guard out of Lubbock, Texas, has narrowed her list of schools to 6. Among the Lubbock Monterey Phenoms finalists are Texas, LSU, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas Tech, and UCLA. It really feels like a big 3 of Texas, South Carolina, and UCLA, right? Those are 3 of the most premier programs in women's basketball right now. But Oklahoma is close to home. She's from Lubbock, so Texas Tech obviously would have to be in there. And then LSU with Kim Mulkey, right? So I guess LSU, it could be a big 4, right? But Texas certainly has a really good chance to land the number one player overall in the 2025 class. She is ranked as the number one overall recruit by every single recruiting service, right? A rival head coach from Abilene High School. This is her quote on Aaliyah Chavez. I have been coaching 20 years now and have seen and coached against some pretty good guards, several who have had standout careers in the WNBA, and Aaliyah Chavez is the best I have ever seen. She is also a phenomenal passer, rebounder, and defender. She can go right or left equally. She can shoot lights out from the three-point line. She has a pull-up jumper. I studied her shot chart to try to find a weak spot, and there was not one, okay? Aaliyah Chavez is 5'10". She's a junior point guard. Her team last year had a 31-6 record. She was a finalist for the Naismith Girls Basketball National Player of the Year Award, and she averaged 37.8 points per game, 10.1 rebounds per game, 4.4 assists per game, and 3.5 steals per game. 38 points, 10 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 3.5 steals per game, right? That's why she's ranked number one on literally every recruiting service, right? And in addition to that, earlier this week, Texas brought in the number 4 prospect in the country, Aaliyah Crump, right, from Minnesota, right? So you got Aaliyah Crump, and now you're trying to get Aaliyah Chavez. But that should be an easy recruiting pitch, right? The 2 Aaliyahs in the 2025 class. And then when you look at 2024, you brought in the number 9 overall recruit and the number 11 overall recruit. And then, of course, the year before, you brought in Madison Booker. So in 3 years at the 40 acres, you could have a senior Madison Booker, right? Number 9 and number 11 players from the 2024 class, and then Aaliyah Crump and Aaliyah Chavez from the 2025 class, all on the same roster. LSU looks like they're going to be really good for a long time in women's basketball. Obviously, South Carolina under Don Staley is going to be really good for a long time in women's basketball. UConn is taking a step back, but they're not really going anywhere. UCLA is a premier program as well. But Texas is right there in that conversation. I would put probably right behind South Carolina right now in terms of the future, in a big way in terms of securing that and continuing to be a national championship contender over the next few years is bringing in one of the best high school players we've ever seen in women's basketball, especially in the state of Texas. Aaliyah Chavez, Texas is in her top 6 and certainly has a really good opportunity to bring a elite generational talent point guard into the burnt orange and white. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em. Peace.